Welcome to Women Winning Divorce. I am your host, Heather Quick. I am an attorney, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Florida Women's Law Group, the only divorce firm for women by women. I love thinking big, thinking outside the box, creating creative solutions for women, and empowering women to win in all aspects of their life. Our approach at Florida Women's Law Group is to provide women with a strategy to not only achieve their objectives, but win at life. I believe that what may show up as adversity is simply an opportunity to change and improve your life. In each episode, I sit down with innovative professionals and leaders who are focused on how you can be your best self before, during, and after divorce. In these conversations, we are looking at how women can win at life. I have the unique opportunity to meet women when they are at a transition period of life. But that is only the beginning to becoming your best self and winning at life on your terms. With our guests, we enjoy the opportunity to explore ways all women can win and enhance their life, no matter where they are in their journey. Because divorce is just a point in life, not the end and not what defines you, rather a catalyst for your growth. Welcome to this week's episode of Women Winning Divorce. I'm Heather Quick, owner and attorney at Florida Women's Law Group. Today, we have a repeat guest, which are our favorite. That means they were so great the first time, we had to have them back. And today, that is Holly Moore, the founding attorney of Moore Family Law Group in California. Welcome, Holly.
Thank you, Heather. I don't know if it means it was so fabulous. Maybe it means like I messed up royally the first time and I have to come back and redeem myself.
Well, no, absolutely not. Sometimes that's usually not the way this works around here, right? If we ask you back, you're awesome. And our listeners gave us a lot of feedback. If it's a train wreck, I just don't know that I'm willing to do that again, right?
Yes. Well, thank you for having me back a second time. It is a pleasure, as always, to be here.
Well, we are so happy to have you. And so for our listeners that did not get an opportunity to listen to your last episode, which we will make sure the show notes let you know which episode that was. So listeners, you can put that on your list to go back to. But tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are now professionally.
Yeah, so I'm a family law attorney in Southern California. I'm a certified family law specialist, and my firm focuses on professionals and business owners. We do some higher profile cases too. You know, we're in Southern California, so we're kind of close to Hollywood comparatively to, being in Wisconsin or something like that. So we've had a couple higher profile cases, and I think, the firm has kind of niched down to that because we just kind of looked at all the different clients that we were serving and realized professionals and business owners, higher asset people, they just kind of had the mindset and the values that sort of resonated with us, and we enjoyed working with them the most. And so that's how we've kind of niched down the firm.
Well, I love that. And it's so nice to have, such a focus. And of course, today we are going to talk about high asset divorce. And, it's because it's different, right? And you've got to there's so many things that you really need to be mindful of and really have experience with, don't you think?
Yes, I do agree. There are certain issues and nuances that exist in high asset that doesn't necessarily exist in kind of like I'll call it your garden variety divorce. So, yeah. And I think, sometimes the dangerous part is you don't know what you don't know, both for the clients and attorneys who are doing high asset divorce and maybe are not familiar with sort of all the ins and outs and different ways that people, have their money in different like financial structures and investment mechanisms and things like that. So yeah, there is a little bit of an additional layer of complexity to it, but that's why it's fun.
Yes, because it's many times it is a puzzle. And, it's really working through that, putting those pieces together, and then determining how that's going to play out for our clients.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, tell us a little bit why you focus on family law and if you always practice that.
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm kind of a broken record because I say this all the time, but I probably haven't said it to you, Heather. So I'll say it. But, you know, they say, whoever they is that, um, you don't find family law finds you. And I feel like that was very much the case with me because when I was, it was actually when I was, even before I passed the bar exam, I was working at a law clerk in a law firm. I was doing construction defect. And it was, big wealthy land developers suing really big like subcontractor companies. And it was so paper intensive. And there would be like 200 litigants in one lawsuit because they just like pull everybody in that they could possibly think of. And I was like, this sucks. um, and they kind of sued each other to annoy each other. And I'm like, it's gonna be, hundreds of thousands of dollars in litigation. And they're like, we don't care. We just want to annoy this guy or that guy. And I'm like, man, this just does not feel good in my soul. And at the time, oddly enough, at the particular law firm I was at, one partner kind of headed up the construction defect part of the firm, and the other partner did family law. And so I had a close relationship with the other partner, and she was like, hey, why don't you try working under me doing family law? So I did that, and it was like, oh, I'm home. Like this is such a better fit, like I feel like I'm helping people and the clients seem like, appreciative that I will sit on the phone and listen to them and things like that. I mean, it just at its most basic human level, it wasn't any sort of like intellectual thing. It felt better to me like on the inside.
Well, it really, that is great. And no, I had not heard that story, or if I had, it's been a while. So
Okay.
I'm glad you shared it. And it's because we're just helping people like every day, and they're going through problems that, many of us have gone through, and they have issues that many of us have had. And if you
Yeah.
like people, it is a good practice area. If you don't like people, it's not a good one to get into, right?
True, true. Yes, yes. I would say if you like people on more days than you don't, because I mean, does
There you
anyone
go.
like people every day? I don't know.
I mean, not if we throw in compared to your dog, right? But
Well,
in general, right? In
right.
general, yes, exactly. So, because we are solving problems for, human beings just like ourselves, and, on their worst day, sometimes in their worst circumstance, where they've really never even had, so many have not really worked with a lawyer before. So they're
Right.
just so new in,
Yeah.
and they can be a very accomplished, educated person, but then boy, they jump into the legal world and they're like, what the heck is this? This is the most inefficient
Absolutely.
process I've ever seen, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some of my most sophisticated clients, you still have to really explain things to them and really kind of walk them through the process. And sometimes I think, we think, oh, because they're sophisticated in their own realm and their industry, like they know what's up here, but they don't.
They don't. And that's when you really have to keep that in mind. I think sometimes you think, oh, they do, even lawyers, but they
Yeah.
practice in a different area,
Yeah.
and they don't have the objectivity because it's their life.
Right. Absolutely true. Yeah.
Now well, I do know that because I was anxiously awaiting the launch of your podcast because I had seen the announcement, and you have recently started a podcast. Tell us a little bit about your inspiration to do that.
Yes, I recently started a podcast. And, Heather, it's really funny because I just maybe in like November, December, I was like, I'm going to start a podcast. And my team was like, okay, why? What's the intention? Who's the target audience? I'm like, I don't really know. I'm just doing it. And then, literally, the night before I shot the first episode, I was doing a post on Instagram to promote it. And I was writing the caption, and the caption just kind of came flowing out of me. And I realized for years, back when it was just me practicing law, I would talk to my clients about all sorts of things, all sorts of ways to like encourage them and make their life better. And how can we use this terrible time to like, really redesign what you want for your life. And as the firm has grown and I have less clients and less contact with, the people on the ground floor, I really haven't figured out a good way to like put my hands around the concept of like talking to them, encouraging them about like how to use this time to become a better version of themselves, and like how to, like make your life better. And I realized that is what the podcast is for. It's like my way to talk to them, and really anybody that will listen about like how to show up as the best version of yourself.
Well, that is great. And we definitely do listen. And we are so happy that you have started it because I know you will help and reach many people.
Thank you. Thank you so much, as you guys are doing with your podcast. So,
Why, thank you. Well, let's get into the topic rather than just, talk about ourselves the whole time.
right.
So let's talk about some unique financial challenges that women may face in high asset divorce. And I know you don't focus on men or women, but since the majority of our listeners are women, I'm going to ask you to address that to our listeners.
Yes. So, stereotypes are there for a reason because, sometimes they ring true. So I would say one of the things for women that is challenging is if and when they are not privy to all the ins and outs of the finances during the marriage. And I mean, you guys, Heather, in your practice, probably see this, I would imagine, in working with, mostly women, exclusively women, where it's like, okay, now it's time to get a divorce. We've, everybody needs to disclose assets and debts. I'm sure Florida has something similar to that. And it's like, the wife is like, well, I really don't know. He always handled that. Husband always handled that. That's always, I think, a challenge, because ultimately, some, you even try to prod them. Okay, well, this is what he disclosed. Do you think that's all there is? And it's like, sometimes you get like, I really have no idea. I have no idea. And so I think that's a huge challenge. And, I am not throwing stones. I'm guilty of that very thing. Like, my husband is the money guy, and I'm, and all the time I tell myself, I should probably take my own advice that I tell these women clients who are in the dark, and I should probably, know myself, but, so I'm not throwing stones, but sometimes that is the dynamic. And then in a divorce, it does present challenges for sure.
Well, and I appreciate that because, normalizing it because everybody has their role in a marriage.
Right.
And, it just is what it is. Things fall where they do. But, I think for women that is a challenge. Not only are they sure about everything, but then, in a high asset divorce, they might really just not even have an understanding of everything that's there, what it means, what it could mean to them.
Right. Yeah. And, sometimes in the higher asset cases, there's a lot of people with their fingerprint on stuff. They've got advice, they've got financial advisors, they've got accountants, they've got business lawyers, a lot of things. And sometimes, wife has not been privy to those meetings and those interactions. And so it kind of compounds the problem even further of one person in the partnership not really having even like a baseline amount of knowledge about what is going on with the assets and debts. Because
Yeah.
I mean, it can go both ways too. Like sometimes, one person doesn't realize there's a ton of debt. They're like, "What? I had no idea." It cuts both ways in terms of assets and debts.
Yeah, and that's a hard pill to swallow, as we know, for the one
Yes.
who's unsuspecting and didn't know. And a lot of times that's just really hard because they're like, how did this happen? It's like,
Right.
well, that's where, communication probably was necessary, but
Yeah.
doesn't always happen. Now, what do you find is the biggest misunderstanding or maybe misconception when it comes to a high asset divorce?
Um, so I think the biggest misconception actually is that it always takes longer and it's always more contentious. I think sometimes and in some ways higher asset divorces actually resolve quicker because there's more, how shall I say it? I mean, there's no other way to say it. There's just more money to play with, And so it's like people aren't necessarily clinging to nickels and dimes because
Mhm.
it's not as significant in their life. And so when you have a little bit, when you have more assets to go around, I think it eases everybody's burden and everybody's fight. Not always, of course, there's an exception to every rule. They can also get super nasty and lengthy and all of that. But I think the misconception is like, they're not always more contentious. They're not always longer than an average divorce. And many times they can resolve quicker.
Yeah, I do agree with you on that point. And also, I've had experiences where when there are the high assets, there is that CPA, that financial advisor who is just very, very knowledgeable. So then you get the information so
True.
quickly, and it's already organized and right.
Yeah.
It's just presented to you and both attorneys in a way that just makes that much easier.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent point where you're not necessarily relying on somebody, who just worked all day to go home and sloth through their file cabinet and find the statements. It's like, yes, the experts, the advisors that they had involved in their life have it all and are ready to hand it over. And that is a luxury that makes the case go much smoother for sure.
Agreed. Now, okay, so you talked about, how you kind of found your sweet spot in the clients based on the experience and working with the high assets, but also high profile. You have experience with athletes, celebrities, high profile divorces. How are these different than divorces when a person's not in the spotlight?
Um, you know, at their core, they're really not different. I would say the only difference I would say with the clients is the clients are maybe a little bit more guarded at first. But once you're in, you're in. Like, and they will do anything you say, most of them. I mean, Kanye is probably the exception to this rule. Like, his lawyer is like, "You're fired, Kanye. You don't do anything I say." So, minus the Kanyes of the world. They really, once they sort of let their guard down, once you get past that point, they're very trusting. They will follow your advice. They will do all the things that you ask them to do, which, Heather, as you know, is not always the case with our clients. um and I would also say that they are very motivated to resolve their legal issues quickly because of the public perception, any sort of PR concerns. And a lot of times they would rather spend more money to resolve it, whether it's giving the other party more money or whatever the case may be, than have it go on and cause like a PR situation for them.
Yeah, and I think that's where you have that other piece of leverage, so to speak, right, is their desire to keep it quiet, keep it, not as contentious and done with soon, right? So
Yeah.
media goes on to talk about something else.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But they're still scared of the same things. They're still concerned about the same things. They still worry for their kids. They still are uneasy about the uncertainty of the future for their finances. They have all the same, fears and worries and concerns as the rest of us. Which I think sometimes we forget, that they're just people too.
Absolutely. Now, let me ask you this. So, is there anything you can do or that you do implement in those kinds of high profile cases to keep it more private? And can you in California? Like, can you
Yes.
keep things really secret on the down low?
Yes, absolutely. So we can hire a private judge. Um, the sort of rub on that one though is everybody has to agree to do that. And so if the other party wants to be the fly in the ointment, and doesn't agree to that, that's, we're kind of out of luck on that one, but we can hire a private judge so that nothing is public record, the filings aren't public, all of that, and it's resolved very quietly by paying a private judge. We can, this one is a little bit harder, but you can request like for the file to be sealed. So the paperwork to actually be sealed with the court, you can also request like a sealed courtroom. That one is a little bit harder to do because, the Constitution says right to a public trial, things like that. But yeah, those are kind of some of the things that you can do to try and keep it quieter.
And how hard is it to steal a family law file and keep those things from the pesky press and media for
Yeah.
getting to them?
Um, you know, I've done it twice. Now that I think about it, I've attempted it twice. Both times were successful. Um, one was a really interesting one. It was I don't know, should I say it?
Yes, yes. Oh my God, I'm waiting. I'm waiting. Yes, Holly.
You're on the edge of your seat.
You gotta tell me.
Yeah, it was quite a while ago, but one was like a pretty famous YouTuber, and
Oh,
it was a family YouTube channel. And I mean, they're probably not a YouTube channel anymore. This was quite a while ago when the kids were young. I'm sure the kids are all adults now. So it's probably not even a thing, but they had to keep the divorce very quiet because their whole brand on YouTube was a family YouTube channel where they would do these, challenges and anyways, I won't say specifics about the challenges, but things that involved mom and dad and kids doing like these crazy things together. So we really had to keep that divorce quiet because that would basically blow up the entire family's source of income, mom, dad, and kids, completely changed the brand. So the court granted it on that. And then the other time I requested it was there was like some security safety concerns if this particular case were out in the public. And the court granted it on that too. So, in the two times I've attempted it, they've granted it. So maybe it's, I don't know. I've either
well,
gotten lucky or
well, it sounds like you had really specific reasons, not just like, I want
right,
to, I want my next movie to have, a lot of
right,
people there, or I don't want to be on page 6, as far as people talking
right,
about what's going on. So I think that's probably why, obviously, you have to
yeah,
have more reasons.
yes,
Now, with that, and I'm just curious because, we're in Florida, and the Sunshine State has sunshine laws, so everything, can be published. And it's quite a challenge not to, unless do it through a collaborative process,
yeah.
which again, it's not as popular. But so your financials are generally going to be disclosed because they have to be filed. Is it the same way in California?
Um, it so yes and no. So it's not necessarily that your financials always automatically are filed. A lot of times, so the sort of like blanket requirement is you have to file the piece of paper saying you exchanged financials, but your financials itself are not necessarily filed as part of the baseline process. So but then it kind of depends on, when the judgment is filed, like what does the judgment say about the financials? It may not say a lot. It may just
Mm.
have the orders. Okay, you're paying $25,000 a month in child support. It may not necessarily say what your income is, but it could. So in
Mhm.
that regard, yes, your financials would be, public record. Um, but not necessarily, but they don't, it's not automatic, I would say.
Not automatic, where here it's generally everybody files a financial affidavit, which, and that it has to be filed. So it's pretty much out there.
So is that financial affidavit, like, is that all the assets and debts?
Yes, it's all your income, expenses, assets, and liabilities. So it's pretty detailed. And
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the thing that we're required to fill that out. We're required to exchange it, but we only just have to file the paper that says we
says
exchanged.
mhm.
Yeah.
You don't have to then file it
Right.
specifically, right? Which
Right.
that's the difference with
Yeah.
Florida. Okay, here's a good question. Now, we often assume that celebrities and high asset marriages have prenuptial agreements in place,
Mhm.
that outline the division of assets for the party. How often is that actually true in your experience?
Not often enough, Heather. Like, how much can I shout this from the rooftops? Get a prenup, and people still don't. Um, Yeah, shockingly not as many as should have it. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess you just get so wrapped up in being in love and You don't want to have the hard conversation of, what's going to go in and stay out of a prenup. And so they just, ride the romance to the marriage and don't have a prenup. So yeah, I mean, yes, probably if we're comparing that group of people, high profile people, celebrities, that kind of a thing, to the rest of us, average Joes, yes, more of them have it than the rest of us, but still not all of them do. And yeah, so
Not unless Kris Kardashian's your mother, right? Because I'm
right.
certain she makes sure those girls
Well,
have it in place.
yes, and actually every time I've done a prenup for a celebrity, professional athlete, etc., it is always the agent that says, you must do this. Go to Holly, and like literally will drive them to me, calls me first, Holly, so and so really needs a prenup. Like, it's the agent. It's never the
Yeah.
person. Yeah.
Right, because they know, okay, got a 50-50 shot here, and you should protect yourself.
Right.
Or you're subject to the laws of California. Which
Yes.
that's why I don't understand, because right, everybody wants their own decision making. They don't want the government telling them what to do. But yet, and the thing that most people do is get married, and yet they leave it to the government to dictate how it's going to be in the breakup.
I know. I mean, maybe they're probably thinking it's never going to happen to me. There's not going to be a breakup. There's not going to be a divorce. Or what I hear a lot is he or she isn't that way. They won't do that. They won't come after my assets in a divorce. Well, whether he or she wants to or not, they're probably going to have a lawyer advising them too, because they're entitled to it. So
Exactly. Yeah, it's just can be so much cleaner with a prenup. So that is a bit shocking to me that you don't see more
right. Yeah.
of those.
Yeah, I would think every last one of them would have that, because generally you assume they all have advisors. They're all wanting to protect, they have a lot of assets. They're wanting to protect that. But I, I think kind of going back to your question of like misconceptions. So one of my clients, he owns like 7 private jets, and in my head, I'm like, and he lives, I don't know, probably 45 minutes from me. And in my head, I'm like, is he going to come to the meeting with me in a private jet? Like you get this like thing. And I'm thinking to myself, why would he hire me? He probably has a team of legal staff. He probably has an attorney for every single thing that would come up in his life. And come to find out, like, he did not come in his private jet. He drove a car like the rest of us would. And 2, like, he doesn't have a legal team for everything. There was actually a lot of areas of his life where I'm like, hey, do you have somebody advising you on that? No, I don't. Okay, can I help you find somebody? Can I refer you? And so sometimes we do have the misconception that, like, they've got it all dialed in. They've got professionals in every facet of their life that are advising them, helping them, taking care of things. And sometimes they just don't. And I think those are the people that end up getting married, no prenup, because they didn't have an agent or somebody there that was saying, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z before you do this. And so they don't have it.
Yeah, and I think that's good for everybody to hear, that not everybody does, but everybody should.
Yes.
Without a doubt.
Yes.
Now, what are some of the challenges involved in valuing diverse assets like businesses, real estate, and investments?
Yeah. Businesses and real estate, that's pretty, like, that's easy. We've got appraisers for that everywhere, that we use all the time. And so that's like rarely presents an issue. But where I see challenges creeping up when valuing assets is when the asset is kind of unusual. And I've had some of those types of things. One that I just recently did an article on that's kind of going around is horse sperm, like, who do you call to find out how much the racehorse's sperm is valued at? So you have to like find, I mean, there's a whole world for that, but you just kind of have to find it and bring that person in. I just had a situation where the parties had a coin collection, but the coin collection is like, it's not like, 20 grand in coins. It's like $1 million. And so we had to get this whole like special appraiser to come in, and, it was like a whole thing, because you can't just like take that down to your local, like turn in your coins for cash shop. And, so it's like when you get into the more unusual assets, that's where it kind of becomes challenging to value them. It becomes kind of like a little, wild goose chase, finding the right people to bring in to value them that are experts in those sort of like, esoteric areas.
Well, and I would imagine if it was contentious, the person who wants to hold on to may want to lower their value
Yeah.
and their perceived value to the court. Of course, not casting any shade on any party in a divorce, but sometimes I've seen that, and
Yeah.
there's more of an incentive, and so that could create like, well, then who's another expert, and how does the court decide, right? Because like horse sperm, I mean, that's got to be. I don't
Yeah.
know how many people there are on that. Yeah.
Exactly, Heather. So like if you have that situation with a house, which that's super common, right? Like one person wants to go on the high end, the other person wants to go on the low end. And like you said, like they're just protecting their interests. And so you get two house appraisers. But yeah, it's really challenging to find two horse sperm appraisers. So yeah, certainly that absolutely creates a challenge, because it's not always easy to find the second person to come in with that second opinion. And at that point, you kind of just have to punt it to the court, and the appraiser sort of, testifies to their expertise and how they arrived at their result. And it's up to the court to decide what they're going to do with that result.
Yeah, that I think I never heard that one before, so that was a good one.
I aim to please.
I know you do. Okay, so again, I know you won't be stumped, but what give us another like example of like a very drastic or complex situation you've seen with a high asset divorce.
I don't know if it was necessarily complex or drastic, but I mean, we've had a divorce where the judgment, so the judge, the divorce judgment, the final document after like everything's decided, lists the assets and who's getting them. And we've had a judgment that had like 3 pages just for the watch collection. Which is like another one where you have to get a watch appraiser to come in and do that. And that's like another one of the sort of, that's a little bit easier to find, but it's not like a home appraiser.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, usually it's just kind of like, unusual and exciting assets.
Mhm.
One of my recent cases has hundreds of thousands of dollars of sea coral. I don't know who appraises that. I haven't figured that one out yet. But yeah, it's very unique.
And did they purchase them or go diving for them? Or that's fascinating. I know you probably can't disclose a whole lot,
So
but like, wow.
yeah, so a little of everything, plus he is now creating it in a lab. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
So
Wow. That's interesting.
yes, it is. Yeah.
Well, okay. So now I think this is a good segue into tell us like a scenario to the extent that you can of one of like your favorite cases or like biggest wins that you've
Mm.
had throughout your career.
I don't know if I said this before, but everybody's probably forgotten by now.
There we
Even
go.
if I had, but to be honest, my favorite cases are um where you have a spouse that is choosing not to work, but maybe they really do have some skills, gifts, and talents. And they were in a marriage where they didn't have to work, and they kind of just got to have a lot of free time during the day or whatever. I mean, they of course do a lot with the kids and things like that. But let's just say the kids are now like fully grown, spouse is terrified of going back into the workforce, and so basically refuses to go back into the workforce. And I'm usually representing the other person, the breadwinner of the family. And so through the course of the litigation, we get a vocational evaluation, which says, okay, this spouse is capable of working at these types of jobs, making this type of money, and therefore support is going to be based on that. Well, usually that support order is lower than maybe what that spouse was hoping or intending it to be. And so they have to get back into the workforce. And what it does, because I've heard through the grapevine, is like it actually does so much for that spouse getting back into the workforce because they don't have the identity of being a wife anymore. The kids are older and gone and need that parent a lot less. And so they don't have the identity of being, that parent that has to tend to needs 24/7 anymore. And so they're feeling lost, and kind of forcing them back into the workforce gives them a whole new sense of confidence, self-esteem, self-worth. It does all these things, even though they hate me for it, Heather. They hate me. They call me all sorts of bad names.
Yeah.
But usually they're like, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I love those cases because I feel like everybody wins. My client wins because they get a reduced support obligation. So they don't have like the huge financial burden of carrying the entire financial weight of the family long after divorce. And the other party wins because they're getting a whole new lease on life through having to get back into the workforce. They're making new friends. They're like getting their eyes opened up to new opportunities, and like they feel so much better about themselves. So I just love that scenario because everybody wins.
Well, that is a good one. I don't think that you told us that last
Okay.
time.
Oh, good.
I would have remembered. I would have.
Oh, okay.
So, okay, let's talk about this. What are things you find yourself repeating again and again to your clients, or your attorneys to them that, you want them to know and you feel like you're always saying this?
Yeah. I don't know if Florida is as bad as California, but in California, it just takes absolutely forever to go through the process. I mean, of course, the parties can truncate that by settling and all those things. But if you have one or both parties who are unwilling to do that and you actually have to go through the whole process, it is painstakingly long, and they are constantly frustrated by it. And so I would say probably the thing that I am repeating the most is like, hang in there, like, just try to focus on something else. I mean, just really dealing with their frustration and them like torturing themselves because they just want it now. They want it to happen. They want it to be over. They want to be out of this process. And it's like really just always encouraging them, it's not about like the day-to-day, battles. We don't have to win every single battle. Like we want to win the war. We want to get you through this in the best way possible, with the best outcome possible. We don't want to tear the family completely apart. Like just hang in there with me. Like it will all work out in the end, but it's very difficult for them on a day-to-day basis because they just feel tortured by the sheer length of the process.
What is the average length of time if you're having to go through the court process?
Right now, about 3 years.
Wow, that is shocking.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a
It's
motivator right there to settle.
Yes. Yes. But that's one of the huge frustrations is because, it kind of seemed like in many of the cases, one person is very motivated to settle.
Right. Yes.
But as you know, it takes two. And the other person is just fine dragging this out as long as they possibly can.
Yeah,
For
exactly.
a myriad of different reasons. So that's where, that's where the frustration really comes in.
Wow. That is a long time. So for our listeners in Florida, we haven't got it that bad. So remember that.
You're right. Yes. It could be worse. You could be
It
in
could be
California.
worse. You could be in California or, my goodness, North Carolina. Ugh.
Oh,
You got it. That's archaic down there. So trust me. Yeah, you're way better. Way better in Florida. So, all right, let's talk about, you represent men and women. And so I'd love your perspective on if you take a different approach, one way or another, or what your experience has been, on each side.
I don't know that we necessarily take a different approach. It does seem that there are different needs and sort of different patterns depending on gender. Um, women, us being by nature more emotional creatures, I think there maybe is like a little bit more, they need more emotional support basically through the process, and we're happy to give that to them. I mean, I think, to be totally honest, men probably need just as much, they're just not as vocal about it.
Mhm.
And so but yeah, so I would say, as it's coming to us, women seem to need more emotional support through the process. Just to kind of give like a very real life example of that, women on the phone talking to their attorney, they'll tell you all sorts of things, the sob story, everything, and it's okay that they're being charged whatever the attorney's billable rate is, because they just want that listening ear. Whereas some of the men, it's like, okay, I'm being charged for this. Tell me, what subpoena is going out? What's the court date? They're just so much more pragmatic and sort of like rational about, I could perhaps talk to somebody else about the emotional aspect of this and not somebody who's charging $500 an hour. That's just like a very real practical example of kind of how that's coming to us in terms of the differences in the genders. Um, let's see what else. Men seem to listen to they listen to advice more, and they're more willing to follow their attorney's advice than women for some reason. Um, I don't know why that is, but I did just see an article this morning on Harvard Business Review that said women are less likely to trust their employers than men. So maybe it's like a
Hmm.
similar thing. I don't know. Maybe us as women just aren't quite as willing to follow what somebody else is telling us. I don't know. But I have noticed that. So I think those are kind of the two things that come to mind as far as the differences.
And what have you learned from working with women and families throughout your career that you could share with our listeners?
Hmm. Um, so I think being a family law attorney has been just a huge sort of, I don't know if experiment, a huge study in human behavior. And I think people are stronger than we think. Even sometimes when they don't think that, I look at a lot of single moms out there who are doing it all, working, mothering, fathering sometimes too, and it's like, wow, like these people are really strong. And so I think I've, been inspired by that. I see a lot of very strong women who maybe on paper, like they don't seem like this warrior. Maybe they've been a stay-at-home mom and they haven't been the breadwinner of the family, but when you look at, okay, now a divorce is looming and now they're really having to do all these things and they just do it. They put their head down and do it. I mean, that's pretty inspiring. Um, and I think kids are also more resilient than we give them credit for. And that's really hard as a mom myself, as mothers, mama bears, we want to protect our kids, we want to shelter them and shield them, but ultimately we're probably doing them a disservice by doing that, because that's not how life is. Us adults are not shielded and sheltered from too much. And so I think, yeah, I think just in general, it's like I've learned that people are stronger than we think, but you don't really know that until you're kind of put to the test, that you're really going through adversity and difficult times. And then you truly see what you're made of. And I think more often than not, people are really strong.
Well, I agree with you. And it's hard because, right, you have to go through that to see how much you can handle.
I wish it wasn't that way, but it is.
It is. And, it's, I think you're right about the children as well. And sometimes that can be a reason people don't want to move forward with a divorce, but yet so often the result of the divorce is, even though two more peaceful homes.
Yes. Yeah.
And that can really and is better for children, than to be one home without peace or love, that can
Oh,
really wear on them.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think I hope people are coming around to that concept where it's like, a home that is, wrought with conflict and really a bad model of what a loving relationship is. Like, you're not doing your kid any favors by staying in that situation. Hopefully people are, as the shame of divorce kind of, as we destigmatize it, hopefully people are kind of coming around to that idea because, we still hear it like we're staying together for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think there's nothing worse. Well, there probably are worse things, but I don't think that's good for the kids if it's a bad, if it's a bad situation.
Agreed. I think people say that, and it's an easy thing to say, but it probably doesn't have the result that they're looking for.
Right.
Not always.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, lastly, Holly, we are coming to an end. I can't believe it. It went by so fast. But where can our listeners find you for more information?
You can go to our website, morefamilylawgroup.com. I'm also on Instagram, Holly J. Moore, at Holly J. Moore. And probably LinkedIn, Facebook, and all the other places too.
All right. Well, and for our listeners, we will make sure you have all the links to find out more about Holly Moore, as well as the podcast. What's the name of the podcast?
Made for More.
Ah,
Spelled like
it.
my last name, Moore.
So clever. So clever. Well, thank you again, Holly. It's just been such a pleasure, and we've reached the end of our show. And for listeners, if you or someone you know is going through divorce or is thinking about a divorce, please reach out to us at FloridaWomen'sLawGroup.com. And also, please check out our Facebook group, Women Winning Divorce. We'd love to see you join that and be a part of that group. Links will be in the episode description. And if you enjoyed this show, we would love your feedback and a 5-star review. Thank you all. From being served to preparing for trial, Divorce 101 will prepare you end to end for the divorce process. I'm Heather Quick, attorney and CEO of Florida Women's Law Group. Join us over the next 6 weeks to feel empowered and educated about a complex and often challenging legal process. Our online course is designed to provide an overview of what to expect, what to prepare for, and offer guidance you may need to succeed and win at life. Over 6 weeks of video and additional resources, we are confident that you will finish our course feeling inspired and educated. Find out more at FloridaWomen'sLawGroup.com/divorce-101 or call us at 904-567-0121.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Women Winning Divorce. My goal is to elevate your life and the way you are thinking so that you are best equipped to win at life. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe so you automatically get my new shows every week. And I would love to hear from you personally. Come join the conversation on social and join our Facebook group, Women Winning Divorce. We welcome your comments and suggestions. We want to bring you content that helps move your life forward. Women Winning Divorce is the place for an elevated conversation on how women can thrive during times of adversity in order to live their best life.